Take one.
So you host retreats across the world and have shared your love for travel. What role has travel played in your personal growth, and how does it influence the way you connect with others?
I think that travel becomes this natural, free anthropology class if you allow it to be, because you end up in a different culture than the one that you're used to, and you get to observe and be part of something and be in different spaces and learn from them if you allow it. So I think that you have to have the goal of wanting new experiences and not just wanting, an Instagram photo or an Instagram reel or something that's like a highlight that you've seen online. My goal for travel is to experience something different that is held in the world, and the retreats allow that. But they also give a communal element to it. So there's an aspect of you going and like being amongst like different people and different cultural patterns and habits and different foods and buildings and structures that you're not used to. And then the retreats allow me to bring community into that. So you are like expanding your mind and learning what it means to be human in all these different ways, but then with a group of amazing people. And then you get to share that with them. And there's something really special about that. So I think it allows me to like open up my mind while being rooted in community.
Nailed it. What do you believe is the most beautiful thing about life right now, either in the world or in your own experience?
I think I'll speak to my own experience right now because there's so much happening in the world currently. I think it'd be hard to pinpoint something something that's singular and beautiful about it. But for me right now in my life, I think I've been able to find the beauty in grief. And I think that there's something about the passing of some of my family members and turning over new chapters that has been so profoundly scary, and that has made me feel so exposed and vulnerable, that I've been able to work through all of that and get to a place of understanding sort of the rite of passage that the rite of passage that grief gives you. And I understand that it's a beautiful space to be in when you're allowing it to change you and transform the way that you look at yourself and look at your family and look at the world. So I would say grief, even though that I know that that's not a typically beautiful thing, but there's something about it that makes you so connected to being human, more so than happiness or joy or accomplishment. There's something about grief in particular that kind of gets to the bone of it, and there's something really beautiful about it.
You hold a lot of strong beliefs that challenge the norm. Are there any that you feel people are often misunderstanding or taking out of context?
Yeah, there's a couple that comes to mind, and they actually, I think, put pressure on different ends of the political spectrum. So there are people who are more conservative who don't really understand what I'm doing with the body positive stuff. They sort of see it as a very narrow and a morally bad way to be, that if you are plus size, you're extremely unhealthy and you're not taking care of yourself. And then on top of it, if you're speaking about that online, about your experience as a plus size person, then you are even more morally bad, because now you're encouraging all of these other people to be unhealthy. And that normally comes from this sort of right political space. And then I think I put pressure a little bit in the spaces that I normally take up, the left spaces, because I will say something along the lines of not necessarily believing in things like trigger warnings, especially if it comes to things like my body or the scars that I have on my body. There will be tension there, and sometimes there will be a misunderstanding, like someone might think that I'm doing it because I want to be like arrogant or inconsiderate of other people's experiences when I just think that I have a different idea of what it means to be present online and how to communicate online and stuff. So those are the two instances that come up for me when you ask that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've spoken about the idea of trading authenticity for attachment. Can you explain what that means for you?
Trading authenticity for attachment to me means that you trade in whatever is true for you to belong. So if you are with a group of people and they're talking about something that maybe you disagree with or that you don't quite understand, or your family believes in something that maybe you don't believe in, or your partner says something as simple as, let's go for dinner tonight when really you want to stay home. Sometimes, a lot of the time, for us to keep connected to those people, for us to feel safe, we won't speak our truth because it'll cause either a rupture or it'll cause some sort of tension or disagreement and conflict. And we're so conflict avoidant that we will do almost anything to belong. And that even goes so far as to not chasing the dream job, not wearing a bathing suit, not going out and meeting new people, not dating, not moving to a new city or country because we're so scared of the unknown or failing or not belonging. And so I think that the trading authenticity for attachment means that we sacrifice who we are to belong in a space that's safe. And the problem with that, that's a choice that you can make. And I understand that choice very well. I've been there. I still do it. I think it would be untrue for anyone to say that they're fully rid of that. But one of the problems with that is you never fully realize what could become of your life if you don't risk it, if you don't risk not belonging, if you don't risk doing something new and letting things like totally be torn down or fall apart behind you. You stay in a space that's so familiar and safe and cozy, but it's not wide or big or adventurous. And again, that's okay. And that's a choice that some people have to make for themselves. And there's something in the unknown and the fear and in spaces where you're trying to figure out where you belong that I think make our hearts beat a little bit faster and that feel a little bit more true to ourselves than we realize. And there's something too about that, our authenticity, like being our most authentic selves, like quitting your job or moving to a new city or like finding a new group of friends or breaking up with a person or going for a person or whatever it is. There's something about that in those actions, that's what makes us belong. It's not about whether or not they become successful, because you can't guarantee that. You can't guarantee that when you reach out past your point of comfort that you're going to succeed. That's never guaranteed, but it's the fact that you're doing it. That's what makes you belong in the world, and that's when your people kind of come to you, and I think that's when you sort of start to be attracted to other people who are similar, or you push yourself in spaces to find your soulmate friends or to find a partner or partners or whatever it is. So I think that the authenticity is where we belong. And I think we need to be attached to that and not be so attached to other people and then sacrifice ourselves for it.
You recently shared a post on things you wish you told people things you wish people told you before becoming an influencer. What's one truth or lesson from that list that you wish more people understood?
Yeah, that is a good one. I did have an answer prepared, but I think what's coming up for me now is there is such a gradient, such a spectrum of content creators, and I think we sometimes take all content creators as that they're all successful and they're all these like extremely privileged individuals who get free things and go to places for free, and they just have so much access to the world. And I would say that's a microcosm of content creators. Most content creators are like not struggling artists, because I don't know if I would put content creation in artistry, but they have 1 to 2 other outside jobs. And sometimes the content creation is literally just for fun. It's not even their job. And I think that there's something there where there's a sort of entitlement that certain audiences and communities can have, where they feel like they can talk to you anyway because you get PR gifts. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what, hell yeah. Like, because there are some content creators that are so profoundly privileged and have so much access to things that the 60 million other content creators in the world don't have. And then there's another part of it like that you can't treat everybody like that, because not every content creator has that same privilege and access. So there's a certain level of entitlement that comes with audiences now that wasn't always there before. And I think it shifted around 2020, 2021, where people began to talk differently to you and stuff. And so I think what I wish that people knew is almost the other side of that. I have a dream to like put on some sort of like interactive showcase and call it like Influencer World, where like people come in and they go to all these different activations and they show you what it's like to be a content creator. And you'll have people like yelling at you, and then you'll be gifted certain things, and then you'll be reprimanded when you don't like share it properly, and you'll be like, losing deals, and like where they can go in and like kind of experience it, because it's such an abstract job and it's so new that I don't think people know exactly how to box it in, or they don't understand sort of the background of it. So I have this idea of like wanting to like bring people in some sort of like interactive way to like kind of like help them like understand like what it is. But there's something about it where I think that we have this idea that there's a sort of a one size fits all when it comes to influencers, and they end up being treated in a particular way. And it's hard sometimes. It's very, very, very hard. And with that entitlement and stuff that comes with audiences, and there are so many beautiful things that come with it too. I've found like best friends and community, and I host these trips, and like everyone's so lovely and so special. And there's still a portion of people that feel like they have access to you, or they feel entitled to talk to you in a certain way because you got skincare earlier that week.
I was just thinking, too, like, it sounded like you're like, I want to put people through like a traumatizing.
I do, absolutely, absolutely. You guys might have to cut that out, but like I do,
Okay, yeah.
I do. I would like to traumatize people, to be like, hey, little one, you guys want to talk to people like that online? You're gonna, come over here and go through this. But there is something about it that it is such an abstract job that I genuinely think people have this idea that content creators are sitting around all day not doing a thing, and that they're just waiting, and they're like getting free stuff, and they just are handed checks in the mail because they're putting stuff up on their stories, and it's so effortless. And I do want to honor that some of it is so effortless, and some of it just sometimes all falls into place where you're like, wow, this is so easy. But at least for me and like the scope of like my space online, that's like 1% of my reality, whereas people who have potentially like 12 million followers and they're not doing much for it, anyways, that's just none of my business. I'm like, I don't even know. But anyways, there's an entitlement that comes with audiences now.
Very interesting. Cool, thank you for that.
Yeah.
You've built a platform rooted in honesty and emotional depth. Has there ever been a moment where vulnerability backfired, and how did you handle it?
Good question. It's like not necessarily easy for me to show my self-harm scars online, because I work with corporations and organizations that are not necessarily so understanding of those things, even though that they might work in like the body image space and stuff like that. So when I show that, it definitely feels vulnerable, because it feels like I'm talking about a very young part of me, and this isn't something that like adults really talk about ever, at least not from what I've seen. So it's like fairly vulnerable for me to like share something about that online, and I don't do it very often, not because I'm hesitating about it, but I just don't organically feel a drive to talk about it. So when I do feel a drive to talk about it, there's definitely tenderness that comes with it. And to piggyback on a previous answer, I don't put trigger warnings on my body, and I sure as shit am not putting it on my scars. And so when I post up about them, I try to do it in a thoughtful way that doesn't compromise my integrity. And without failure, there's always someone who comes in and like is very offended by it because they would have preferred a trigger warning on it. And I feel like it's a bit of a limbo space of, I think that it's a bit of a liminal space where there's sort of this like one part of the community that like, of course, that would never want to trigger warn, put a trigger warning on a person's body. And then another part of the space is like, well, this has to do with like mental health. So now you have to trigger warn it or put a trigger warning on it. And I just disagree with that as my core values of like how we talk about mental health and mental illness. And I understand that that's not for everybody. The way that I talk about mental health online and the way that I talk about like my own story and the way that I ultimately talk about my body, I'm not putting a trigger warning on that, especially because like this part of my body comes with me every day. If I'm in a t-shirt, I'm not gonna like censor that in everyday life. I'm not censoring it online. And that's not, it's not that my vulnerability is backfiring, but it's that not everybody's going to accept that part of me where I'm sharing so freely because of how I'm sharing it. It's not that they don't necessarily like agree or like accept me for who I am. It's that I decide to share it in a way that they don't align with. So that's the place where I'd say like I'm being like very vulnerable. And I know now after having these sort of incidents that someone will be upset with it, and there will be a little bit of friction or tension between 10 people, 15 people, 20 even, 100, 1,000. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And it said there is no such thing as morally wrong literature. Can you take us deeper on what you mean by that?
Yeah, good question. Literature being the language of imagination came from a literary critic and professor. His name's Northrop Frye. And in this series that he has called The Educated Imagination, he talks about how literature and stories is this sort of way that we get to communicate what we're imagining and what we're feeling, and that the imagination is sort of part of us, and writers or people that are, putting these stories into words, they have this desire to communicate what is happening in this world of theirs. And so literature ends up being this language of imagination of this world. And there's an idea that all literature kind of talks to each other in the sense that all literature kind of piggybacks on one another. And once a story is put out into the world, it is now part of that entire world, and it no longer solely belongs to the author. It belongs to the world of literature, and it is only known in reference to all other literature. So we only know, if there's a book that's written about like a hero that overcomes things, that only makes sense in the world where all other literature talks about heroes. That's the only way that we all reference it and understand it. And Northrop Frye also talked about how once literature is written, it isn't the author's, and because of that, regardless of the author's intentions, literature stands on its own. So this piece of art, whatever it is, stands by itself, and our author's intentions are irrelevant because you, the reader or the observer of the piece of literature, you get to decide what is actually being communicated. The author could intend for there to be a lesson, or could intend for there to be these sort of sneaky hidden signs or signals, but they might not succeed at it. And so the author's intentions are kind of irrelevant in this sort of way, in one corner of how people view literature. And that ties into the morality of it. There's no morally bad literature because literature is written for the reader, who then puts on its own cultural interpretations into it. If an author wants to, like insert something that is like morally wrong, like for instance, the book Lolita that has to do with like, you know, an older man falling in love with like of this very young girl, we can generally agree on in our culture that, you know, we have this like set of like laws and norms that like that's like a weird thing to like think about and to have ideas on, and we don't really want we don't want that. And so this piece of literature is talking about these like bad things, so therefore it is morally wrong. Like sometimes people can have that sort of linear thought process to it, but other people would say that actually we learn about humanity through these pieces of work, and that it's not morally wrong because it might bring up things that have to do with morals and laws and ethics and values and all of those things. But the piece of literature itself isn't morally wrong. There's nothing bad about it. It's a story that then we get to learn from. We get to think about the time in which it was written, the culture in which it was written, what that means today, and then we get to have philosophical conversations on things like laws or conventional boundaries or like age gap relationships, like whatever it is. So in that sense, you know, we are giving it the value. The piece itself doesn't hold anything or contain it unless the observer is ascribing value to it.
Your life is a novel. You're the author. And every year, is a chapter. What is this chapter you're currently entitled?
Why would you do that to me? Oh my gosh, I don't know. There's so much in a title. How can you choose? On the spot? Oh my God. Can I take my time? It's like, this is gonna define me. Like, I'm gonna look back on this. It's funny because I'm working on a book proposal right now, and I find that I start getting really intense about chapter titles. Like almost as if they're a gate, and every gate that you enter signals like what's behind the gate. And so there's so much in a name, you know, there's so much in the title of a chapter. And then I'm also telling myself, I'm like, who gives a fuck? They're just gonna keep reading anyways. But I find I get like really stuck on it, like it means something to me. So it's so funny that you asked this question. Like it's very serendipitous that you asked it, because I almost chose the chapter names before I even wrote them. But okay, I would think that I would call this chapter Palimpsest. Do you guys know what that is? It's like a type of scroll or a type of parchment that has been like rewritten over and over and over through the years. So it would fade, and then you would like write over it, and then there would be like multiple layers of like different types of like writing on it. And I feel like I'm in that chapter right now because I have in the last 4 years have tried to rewrite my life in so many different ways. Traveling the world, long distance relationship, failure, coming back to Toronto, building a cabin, going to school, like figuring out this other next chapter. And I feel like I'm constantly going back to like almost my blueprint, and I'm going, no, not that way. And then I'm like rewriting it and doing something different. I'm like, no, this is what now I know that this part doesn't, now that I know this part doesn't work, I'm gonna do something different. And so I would maybe call it that, Palimpsest.